Now, this next story actually brought me to tears earlier when I first saw it. Not many things do, even though I see so many dark things happening in politics and the history behind the politics. I read up on a lot of this eugenics. It really turns my gut. But I particularly can't stand a lot of this police abuse. And this is a story about a man with Down syndrome who was killed in police custody because he was seeing the movie Zero Dark 30. Liked it so much he wanted to remain in his movie theater seat. They told him to leave. He didn't want to comply. And they sent in the off-duty police who were there at the movie theater as, quote, security guards. And somehow it resulted in his death. Adon Salazar wrote the article late this evening. It'll be up later on InfoWars. Man with Down syndrome asphyxiated by police. It was, of course, ruled homicide. A Maryland mother is distraught after her 26-year-old son died last month, January 14th, following his encounter with 3 off-duty sheriff's deputies in a movie theater. This took place in Frederick County there in Maryland. And not only did he have Down syndrome, but they say he resisted arrest and started shouting obscenities at them. Well, guess what? I guess you've never encountered a Down syndrome people. Sometimes they act out. They don't always behave, but you've got to tolerate them. You've got to deal with it. You've got to give them a chance to calm down. Rob Dew earlier called people with Down syndrome God's children, and they really are. If anyone's innocent in our society, it's children, it's the elderly, it's mothers, but it's especially people with mental disabilities, people who can't live necessarily a full life, but are still innocent and sweet and good in so many ways. And really in the case of Robert Saylor, you could see the life in his eyes. I know we have some of the pictures if we could roll that. And I just want to let police know, if this was an accident, so be it, but it's been ruled homicide. It really looks like they went too far. I just want to let you know that Robert Saylor is not your target. The American people are not your target. Pregnant women with guns are not your target. Elderly people defending their homes with shotguns are not your target. Mothers on playgrounds with children are not your target. And children, even if they're holding guns, are not your target. Yet, of course, we've seen this media meme where schools treat children with plastic guns, with drawings of guns, talking about toy guns, with imaginary grenades as the enemy. They arrest them. They put it on their permanent record. They discipline them. They kick them out of school. And it's all sending the message that not only are guns illegal, but that the American people are scum. Well, I'm here to say no to that. Robert Saylor was clearly a wonderful human being who had dignity, who was alive, and we should respect him. We should support a full investigation of this matter, and we need to get past this above-the-law attitude with police. If these sheriff's deputies, if these off-duty cops are found to be guilty of his homicide, of his murder, they need to go to jail, because we've seen far too many cases where justice is not served. And, of course, I've got the article here in the Washington Post. They did do an autopsy, which, in fact, found that he died by asphyxia while in police custody, because, again, they said he resisted arrest sitting in his chair in the movie theater because he was just excited by this movie and wanted to see it again. And they yanked him out and pushed him on the ground. And somehow they say they put him in the position on the ground that it caused him to suffocate. Well, they should have been mindful of that, you little scumbags. You're probably just jealous because you have limited capacities, especially for recognizing humanity. And clearly you didn't recognize the humanity of the least among us. And Jesus, among others, said that what you do to the least of us, you do to me. And that remains true. You need to recognize that factor. But remember the BART cop who murdered Oscar Grant at point-blank range because he didn't pay for an $8 train ticket? Even though he was already in custody, the officer said he thought he was reaching for his taser, but accidentally whipped out his gun and killed this man. And I recognize the police didn't recognize his humanity either. That cop went to trial, was sentenced with 2 years in jail, served 11 months, got out with unqualified parole where he could not be put back in jail, would not be monitored or required to check in with parole officers. Basically, he was given total immunity after doing just a in-name-only sentence for less than 1 year for pretty much a hardcore murder while he was on duty there. And police, you need to disassociate from these bad apples. You need to call out their bad behavior, distance yourself. Can you imagine police 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago treating people this way. Even if they are criminals, you don't execute them. There's due process for a reason. People have fought for those liberties for hundreds and hundreds of years in history, and you especially don't do it to people with Down syndrome. You especially don't do it to people who are already under your custody, who are already under control. But there's the BART cop killing, caused riots. The guy got off with no time. There's the case you probably didn't even hear about in Seattle a couple years ago of John T. Williams. He was accused of being basically a drunk indigent Indian who the police later testified and tried to make a big stink about was a nuisance to Seattle. And I've analyzed the dash cam footage. They found this guy. He was being rehabilitated for alcoholism. They had taught him to be a whittler with a little carving knife and a piece of wood as therapy to try to deal with his alcoholism. So he would walk around the city just whittling away with this little knife, and a cop pulled up on him. It's shown on dash video, got out of the car and killed him within a matter of seconds with multiple shots, fatally wounding him, saying that he was an imminent threat, even though the cop was in his car. No other individuals were around this man, and they wouldn't even call a grand jury against this cop, even though the dash cam footage is very damning. They settled with the family for about $1.5 million. They're going to put up a statue in his name. Well, they put up a statue for Robert Saylor. Well, it won't bring him back, people. There's other cases. Last week, a couple weeks ago, we covered the NYPD case where Joe Lozito was attacked by a serial killer on the subway, fended him off unarmed. The assailant had been wielding a knife, and there were police standing 2 or 3 feet away behind a closed door who were too cowardly to intervene, even though they were carrying a gun and a baton, but they wouldn't intervene against this killer, and then later took credit for it in the media. And there's other cases. It happens all the time. That's just a few that you hear about. I'm just disgusted. I really was upset all day long about this case with the poor man with Down syndrome, and I really hope we see justice.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.